30 seconds always seems like a long time. Hello, everybody. It's 11 o'clock and it's Wow Ergonomics with me, Graham Coath and Steven Howe. I thought I'd put that on today so that it gave us time to, get ready, blow our noses and whatever else we needed to do.
It was like reverse snow, Graham, wasn't it?
It was. Yeah, it was like interference on your screen, but purposeful interference. So have you had a good week, Stephen?
Yes, so far, yes. And I think one of the things we were going to cover was one of the things we said we'd chat about potentially was my blood donation, wasn't it, yesterday? Which is, I've got to be honest, I'm still slightly feeling the after effects of having not done it for about 20 years. It's it sort of knocked me for six a little bit, to be honest. It was great to do it, and I think I'd sort of got into it on the back of seeing a lot of social media sort of advertising for people to donate blood.
Right.
So again, I know that one we might cover that a bit later on, but yes, so far so good. So that sort of knocked me for six yesterday, and then here we are again today, and I think we're going to do this for the next 3 or 4 weeks as well, Graham. So it's enjoyed it so far.
We are indeed. Well, and I caught up with my mum this morning because my dad had his COVID jab yesterday.
Right.
Because he's just under 80, so he managed to sneak in a jab, but he's feeling dreadful this morning. Not trying to put anybody off having their COVID jab, but he is. He's my mum's quite worried about him because he's running a bit of a temperature and he's feeling awful. So there you go.
And was he told which one he'd had, Graham? Because I believe people are being told which of the two vaccines they're being given, aren't they?
Well, I didn't speak to him. I socially distanced quite a bit from my mother. But no, I didn't speak to him because he's laid up in bed. He's that ill with it that she's almost considering calling the doctor. So it'd be interesting to know whether anybody else has had any adverse reactions to having the vaccine, and or whether for many people it's absolutely okay. I suppose it may depend on, again, whether you've got any existing conditions and or what age you are, etc. So it'd be good to get some feedback like that on that. Did you watch the panorama program last night about the 100,000 deaths in the UK? That I thought was quite interesting.
Okay. What in particular, Graham? Any sort of nuggets from it that you really took away from it?
Yeah, well, clearly, I thought that the main emphasis of the program was really to hit home to anyone that still believes that this doesn't exist, which is frightening to me. That with 100,000 people actually dying, and we know people that have had it. Certainly, I spoke to someone that we've had talking at one of our events earlier in the week, who's only just getting back to work after having it. So it's real, folks. If you still don't believe it, it's absolutely real. And I guess one of the things that I took away from it is the overwhelming guilt that some people feel, having passed it on to other family members who have then gone on to die. And I think that's that's a really difficult thing. And I just wonder what's happening in terms of support and mental health support for those families where that's happened, because it's that's a very unusual situation, isn't it, to be in, where there was one couple that work in the NHS, and on the one hand they're incredibly proud and pleased that they're able to help so many people with that have had COVID, but on the other hand, it was because one of them caught COVID and brought it home, and then their mum got ill that she died. So that's a very difficult thing to cope with. Mr. Rushton has put a comment in. Sadly, a friend of mine's father had an adverse reaction, sadly passed away. Very, very rare reaction. So there you are.
Is that to the jab?
That will be to the vaccine. Yeah. No intervention is ever going to be 100% safe. It's like anything that you have medically. You know, if you go into hospital even for something routine, things can go wrong. People can react to things. People can have an allergic reaction to things. So, you know, there's always a risk. But
nothing's ever sort of branded up as 100%, is it? There's you know, and you know, you look at the figures, and even if it's 99.5, you think that 0.5% is still a number of potentially hundreds of lives, isn't it? Hundreds of families. So it's, you know, it is these parameters we're hearing about. Unless they're 100, which they can't be, there are going to be lots and lots of people impacted by it, like the example that Simon's shared with us there.
Yeah. Now, the first thing that I want to, or subject matter that I want to talk about today is, and I read a very interesting article on this that someone had posted on LinkedIn the other day. It was on nomadic working. There you are. There's another term. We've had
one to the list.
We've had hybrid, we've had agile, we've had flexible. Now there's I put nomadic there. That's absolutely wrong, isn't it? Nomadic working and using, and alongside that, using working from home kit on the road as well. So I want to bring that side into it as well.
So Graham, what was the definition? What definition was given for nomadic working as opposed to home or hybrid? Did they sort of define it a little bit further? Because to me, that sort of, I have visions of someone sort of walking around in the wilderness when I hear nomadic.
Well, it's the concept that the younger generations are beginning to look at work and say, well, actually, because I can do work anywhere for a company, and you know, digital transformation and digital accessibility enables me to do that work wherever I am in the world, as long as I've got, you know, Wi-Fi access, etc. That why do I necessarily have to stay native to wherever I was born, or wherever I grew up, or wherever I did my degree, for example, when I start to look at doing work? You know, why can't I actually travel at the same time as doing a job? And therefore, you know, I can live a more nomadic lifestyle in terms of where I am and where it is that I'm, you know, my feet are under the ground, if on the ground, as it were, but I can still do work for a company who are based wherever in the world.
Now, I saw an interesting, or heard an interesting story last week that someone may correct me on if I get it slightly wrong, but I was watching the England versus Sri Lanka test match. I don't know if you're a cricket fan at all, Graham, but it was one of the advantages of being an early riser is when there's test matches in Sri Lanka, you tend to be able to see a lot of it before work. But there was a story about a guy who had gone out to Sri Lanka last March for when this group of games, this series was originally planned, which was March last year, and it then obviously got abandoned because of COVID. But I think if I got the story right, he was a web designer from London or the southeast, but had never returned home, and he'd stayed in Sri Lanka for a whole year, I believe, still doing his job as a web designer remotely. And 12 months later, 10 months later, when the games had actually taken place, he was still actually out there. He'd never, ever gone home. So we'd stopped there from March to January. So what's that, thick end of 10 months? But I believe he potentially could be what we're referring to, is that he'd gone out there, decided not to come home. I guess as a web designer, he'd just be able to pick up a laptop or a Mac or whatever it would be, and was able to do his job. Now, I'm 99% sure that was the story, but it sort of interestingly ties in with what you're touching on it.
No, that's an absolutely perfect example of a nomadic worker. And I can understand that, you know, again, it's about a cultural shift that typically, I guess in the past, people have always done like gap years, haven't they, to travel? Or, you know, when you're at university, there were always one or two that sort of did the first year with you and then disappeared around the world somewhere because they felt the need to travel as part of their life experience. But then they had to come back to their education, and you know, it was always felt that you had to get that travel in whilst you were in your student years or before your student years started, because once you got a job, you would be settled in terms of geography. But this is an interesting sort of dynamic, which is that, potentially that the gap year doesn't necessarily happen anymore, or you do your degree, and then you start work, and then you carry on traveling, or you travel through all of it. In fact, you could actually say, with the sort of increase in the availability of courses online as well, why not travel whilst you're doing your degree, and then continue to travel for the rest of your life whilst you're working? And that this is an option that is now open to this generation, which has probably not been open to people before, because of the digital tools that are available, and the amount of things like cloud software and sort of cloud storage, etc., that enables firms to work collaboratively, wherever you are in the world, and it doesn't really matter. And as those infrastructures increase in flexibility and performance, as we start to roll out things like 5G in countries, etc., as well, then surely this will become more normal for people, but also it probably ties in with the cost of living, or the lack of availability of affordable housing in certain countries as well. I mean, again, it has always been the sort of one of the life goals, for previous generations, to save up and buy and own your own property. But if that becomes completely unaffordable, and all you're ever going to do is rent, again, why even rent? Why not just live on the road, as it were?
But as you say, I think the fact that so many courses, university or college or further education, whatever it would be, are having to go online at the moment. I'm guessing there'll be some research or studies done in the coming years and months that go, actually, this type of degree, whatever the subject would be, works particularly well online. So actually, we will only offer that course online. Yes, there'll be some courses that, I guess the more practical jobs that will need that face-to-face, but there's bound to be some where they will just go, actually, it works fantastically online. You come in, once every year or something on the first day, and then crack on. We'll see you next September. So that has to happen. And therefore, as you say, that combination of gap year, traveling, could be done at exactly the same time as the study, couldn't it?
It could. And when we start to think about this in relationship to ergonomics and how people are working safely, this opens up a whole new minefield.
Absolutely.
Because particularly around the whole assessment piece, how do you assess that? I mean, how do you even start to assess that? I mean, companies are already beginning to struggle, I believe, in many instances, with the working from home piece. That when we had people in the office, we knew that all of these people were within our jurisdiction. We knew physically where they were sat, what they were sat with, what their layout was. We could put into place a fairly uniform an immediate sort of tick box affair to begin with, and then maybe bring in the specialist if needed, if there was anything wrong with that working environment. Now that people are working from home, we don't even know what their working from home space looks like. We can ask them whether or not it's suitable or not, but do they really know whether it's suitable? Are they telling us the truth? Because we can't, especially within this pandemic, we can't necessarily get into their homes to actually see that. But this brings in yet another interesting area, which is, if people are traveling and they're moving from one place to another and they're carrying on their work, what is their working environment? And ultimately then we are talking about potentially larger and larger swathes of a generation who are actually going to need to be assessed in some shape or form moving about.
Yeah.
You know,
there's an education piece though there, Graham. I guess is for sort of sharing the knowledge that the industry has with people. I'm not saying to self-assess. I mean, there can be an element of self-assessment in there, but actually just getting 3 or 4 good habits and good pieces of knowledge out there that those people can make, to a degree, some adjustments themselves, or get the basics of a good setup right if they are working in a nomadic state, as it were. I mean, yes, there'll always be the requirement for the specialists. There'll always be that requirement, but I'm wondering, on a certain level, getting some basics out there that they become ingrained, whether it's through training departments or assessment run days or whatever, just to make more people aware of 1 or 2 of the basics. Because we've been discussing 1 or 2 situations that have cropped up for both of us. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone just last week who, it was the classic example: dining room table, so chair too low, table too high, major problems, elbow and wrist. And again, that was just a very basic example of I guess that's a classic situation that we talk about and use, but it was a real life situation of someone, again, still having those issues and not lack of awareness as to how to correct those type of issues, or to flag it up and go, do you know what, this isn't right, something needs to be done. So it's still going on in, I was going to say, thousands and thousands of homes, probably millions and millions of homes throughout the whole planet, where this is still going on. And it's still that there are good areas, and there's expanding areas of people who have knowledge about what setup should be, but there are still huge swathes of industries and populations where they're continuing to work in the incorrect manner, and unless they take it on positively, they're going to continue to have those experiences and problems, aren't they?
Simon's back again. I spent 4 years bashing out scripts, sat cross-legged on a single bed in Mombasa. A table would have been luxury.
Yeah.
There you
yes.
go. Exactly that. And I think that's a really good example as well of what I'm talking about here, because certainly with some product areas and some adjustment areas, there's going to be something that can happen at the individual level where we can actually say, you can take this stuff with you, we can make it lightweight for you, or we can make it lighter weight than it's ever been before. This should be essential kit in your bag just as much as pants and socks are, and it should go everywhere with you, and we can do an education bit around that. But it would be interesting to see that if this continues as a growing trend, whether that office piece that we've talked about in the past as well, that will change as well, so that, again, if more people across the world are working from home and office spaces or public spaces, when we start to move again, are more available, do we see sort of drop-in centers for working for the nomadic worker? Doesn't matter, you arrive in a city center somewhere or whatever, and there's a space where you have the chair, you have the desk, you bring your own kit to it, but you can set yourself up and work comfortably in that area. I mean, those places do exist in some places at the moment, but do we see an increase in that maybe in order to facilitate this new way of working? Maybe.
But I can imagine, Graham. I mean, I've worked in, there's big brands out there who offer that sort of facility, but I'm guessing those are businesses that will really have been hurt by what's going on the fact that the home working encouragement is taking the lead. So I think for those sectors, they've probably had a real sort of bust situation, but I think the boom situation for them will come back in the future. There'll be huge demand, and potentially, I guess, certain office space that organizations don't want will turn into those nomadic temporary working locations. That area I can see being a real boom, but I guess they're potentially, or they will be absolutely struggling at the moment, won't they, with the fact that the people just will not be going into cities and towns to work. Maybe that's a way of sort of regenerating some of the high street potentially.
I was going to say I may have just hit across something really fantastic there as a business idea. But and actually, when you said that businesses won't want, or space that businesses won't want, maybe that's it. You see, maybe businesses will retain spaces but share those spaces, and I'm certain that that's going to happen more, because it may be that you retain a space that you hire out to your own team, if you like, on certain days, but it's available, or part of it is available to other people for the rest of the time. So it may be that, this is a way that landlords can work, or commercial landlords can work going forwards with tenants to find a solution that enables this more sort of agile stroke flexible stroke nomadic workspace all around. Now,
nomadic or nomadic, Graham?
Do you know what? Moving about.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to just search through these. Find one of my polls and just bring that up on the screen. I do polls every morning, folks. If you're on LinkedIn, then you can find my polls every single morning. Do take part, and that sometimes they are based around the sort of topics that we cover on shows like this. So this morning I did one about the fact that we were doing this show, the fact that when we first met, we met at Gloucester service station for a chat, and you were the only person there that had any ergonomic kit out, using it, etc. And I said, when we can travel freely again, will you start using equipment with your laptop, tablet on the road to work safely? Interestingly, as I took this a few minutes ago, nearly 50% have said yes, but there's still nearly 50% of the population out there who haven't even considered it or are saying no. And that's scary, and it ties in with the piece that we've just talked about, which is that there is equipment available. A lot of people are now buying this equipment to put into their homes, but are they buying the right equipment as well? Because are they buying equipment that is then flexible enough for if they do start working out and about in these different places again, and being more agile? I'm not certain that for a lot of them they are, and maybe people are still putting into place solutions which are very fixed, and they are still not considering that from time to time they will work in other places, and this is a good habit in all of those places. It may also be that we are still very English about this as well, and we still think we're going to look like plonkers using this stuff in public. What's your take on this?
We are very much a nation that sort of doesn't like to sort of stand out. And I remember, as you say, we did Minute Gloucester services, and as you say, I was the only person there. But I also had a similar situation. I think it was a few weeks before we'd met, and I think it was at one of these shared office space locations in London, and I did exactly the same thing. And I met this guy who I'd met for the first time, and I said, just to show you the sort of size of the opportunity, or actually the size of the risk, I said, have a look round this room. And we looked round, and it was central London. There must have been 70 or 80 people. Actually, there were two people using equipment, Graham. One of them was me. One of them was someone using a laptop stand, but not using a separate keyboard. So typing at a 45-degree angle. And said to this guy who I met, I said, A, you can see the opportunity here and the risk, but B, it's people using the equipment incorrectly is as bad as not using anything. So it was quite staggering to see. I think people have got to get past it. How many times are people going to, be it a McDonald's or a Costa or the service station, and they are taking a good break from driving from a long journey, which they should be taking on a regular basis, whether it's working at a desk or being in a car, you should be taking regular breaks. If they're going to go and set themselves up for a period of time, they should be taking their equipment with them, and they should be using it, whatever brand it's from, but they should be taking that with them, because it almost negates to a point. So you're going to do all that at home, which is great, but then when you leave the house, you're just not going to bother.
Yeah.
So people, it needs to become, I guess, habit and routine that actually, I am going to be set up. And I think if you go back to the very basics of something like the HSE regulations, if I remember rightly, it states if you're using such a thing as a laptop for over an hour, you should have 3 or 4 of the key accessories that we've discussed, the laptop stand, the keyboard, you should have them. It's there. It's on the HSE website stating that. So it's giving you good advice. That hour is, if you know you're going to use your laptop for literally 5 minutes, okay, you may make a decision and go, is it worth it for the fact I'm literally doing 5 minutes? I still, to me, would suggest people take it with them, because that 5 minutes can turn into 30 minutes. But the advice is there from HSE. The advice is there from the ergonomic sector. More and more health and well-being managers at large corporates are aware of the benefits of it. People just have to make it become part of their routine. I think there's also an onus on corporates, though, Graham. I mean, I'm still speaking. I mean, as you know, we've had conversations before. We don't work with. We work through a network of partners with our product, so we don't have any direct relationships with large corporates, but I am introduced to them by partners, and there are still organizations doing nothing. And I guess, yes, there are some of them that are maybe struggling in the current times with the restrictions, but when you start breaking it down and you go, it's the investment is X, but there's people having a lot of pain. There are still people, and you mentioned it about being an English thing. I certainly think it's a more potentially of a UK wide thing than compared to some of our sort of sort of friends over the channel, where it is still looked at, for me, too much financially. They're seeing a cost on the bottom line, not the fact that it's adding value and benefit and productivity. So I think there's a lesson there. If you've got the kit, make sure you're using it. But if you're working for an organization that isn't providing it, challenge them. Why are you not providing me this kit? And if you are the decision maker at that organization, then engage with the sector, the ergonomic sector. We can advise and we can support. We can acknowledge that clearly financial constraints exist, but for a relatively small investment, it will relieve a lot of the pain that people are experiencing out there.
I also think we've got to start younger with people as well. A lot of the industry centers its attention in terms of education on people that are already grown up.
Yeah.
But I actually think we have to start younger, because I mean, my wife, who's a dental nurse, part and parcel of the work that they do is going into schools to teach young children about it's fun to brush your teeth, or but it's important, but it's also it's not painful, it can be fun, there's nothing, and you can have a toothbrush that's got a crocodile head on it, and your toothpaste can, but it starts early, and then it forms a habit. And I was thinking just now when you were talking about that, about the fact that it was only a generation ago that we drove around in cars without seatbelts.
Yeah.
Right. And, if you try and get some of the old boys and girls out there and tell them, they've got to wear a seatbelt, they don't like it really, because they didn't used to have to wear a seatbelt, and they probably think it's still a bit silly, some people. But
does anyone still drive around without a seatbelt?
In the West Country, they do, yeah. But I shan't name names because the police would obviously arrest them. But,
absolutely.
But the point is that it was how that generation were brought up. Now, you and I were taught right from the word go, when you learned to drive a car, that you wore a seatbelt. So it's now, you don't. In fact, it was part and parcel of what you got tested on. You had to get in the car. You immediately had to, make sure your seatbelt was right. You had to look over to your driving instructor and make sure that your driving instructor was, had their seatbelt on before you pulled off. So it's, and that you have to check and make sure that you're responsible responsibility, goes further than that in the car. You have to check that every one of your passengers is secure. So you grow up with that, and then it's embedded, and that surely it's about that with the ergonomic piece, getting that into children's heads, I think, really at a younger age as well, and making them realize that, if you're going to sit there with a laptop all day or a tablet all day, etc., you've got to have these different things, and I have to nag my kids to start doing it, because it's comfy here lying like this, Dad. I don't need to use all of that, etc. But once you get them into it and it becomes a habit, and you tell them why, then they start doing it.
But it comes back again, Graham, to the subject we started, which we all talk about all the time, is the COVID pandemic. The homeschooling piece has exposed children of a lot younger age to using laptops. I mean, my youngest son, who's 9, is doing work online and doing lessons online, and I'm sure there's children younger than him, but they must be doing it as well, whether it's to a tablet or a laptop. So I think, again, this huge sort of social experiment we've discussed around COVID is exposing people of a younger age to using a laptop on what is a daily basis. So again, you almost could come out of this pandemic with a whole load of other issues, which is 8 and 9-year-olds walking around with dodgy shoulders and dodgy elbows, which it could well be the case. So actually, there is an argument, as it were, that actually we need to, again going back to the ergonomic industry, is introducing ourselves into the primary education piece and working our way up, not just starting with the university students, where there's generally a lot of interest in that sector, but almost seeing that the demographic sort of bottom has dropped from 18 to probably down to 6, 7, or 8, really, for using equipment for an extended period of time.
Yep. Well, we'll come on to it a little bit later, maybe, if we have time. But
okay.
It's one of the reasons why I do things like the music podcasts,
yes,
etc. Because for me, it's about putting myself in a space that, especially with some of the music stuff that I do, that is inhabited by younger people. And they would never, a lot of them would never even go looking for or even think about ergonomics as a subject matter, wouldn't necessarily look for that education. But if I can do anything to bring some people over into that space by inhabiting their space in another way first and gaining their trust, then I think it has to be done. And for the future, I'd like to see some of the companies like yours, etc., doing a little bit more within the school sector as well, and actually saying, look, guys, this what's happened here could happen again at any time. You now have the tools and the equipment at home to learn from home. There will be times in your life when you have to do, when you maybe get towards your exams or whatever, where you're doing more work on a laptop at home. We've got to teach you to do it. We've got to get your parents to actually buy this kit, and we've actually got to start you learning how to use this stuff, from a younger age. Because if that happens, those people will just gravitate into that in adult life, and they won't feel quite so silly about using it, and that's a really important piece. So another topic that came up, and I'll see if I can find again the poll on this, because this was quite interesting. I will be discussing this with Online Ergonomics next Tuesday as well, live on there, because it's such a hot potato, this one, I think.
Yes. We touched on it briefly last week, I think, Graham, didn't we, in our conversation? But I don't think we went into...
Absolutely. So let me see if I can find the one. No, not that one. It's this one. Okay. For those of you who are listening on Spotify, you don't know what I was doing there. I was putting the wrong polls up on the screen. So which of these do you believe is best for home working? This was another poll that I did on my LinkedIn profile one morning, and I started off by talking about some of the different mechanisms that were on the market, just to show people that I knew what on earth I was talking about, and also to blind people with science. But there are so many different mechanisms out there: permanent contact, ballpoint synchro, free float synchro, independent seat and back, box knee tilt, etc. But I said, but which of these do you believe is best for home working? Gaming chair, operator chair, physio ball, no idea. This has got to be a bad result for anyone selling operator seating, or you know, a term that I really dislike, ergonomic seating. But proper seating that's designed to fit an operator using a computer, because only 24% said an operator chair, 26%, and there was quite a lot of comments on this, said no, gaming chairs far more comfortable. 7% for physio balls, and 43% of people have absolutely no idea what they should be sitting on.
The gaming chair one's interesting because I know that what I've seen coming out from some of the schools has been how they can access some of the necessary software through PlayStations and Xboxes, hasn't it? So I guess that one does sort of tie in the fact that, hang on, you're telling me to go and access my schoolwork through my PlayStation. Well, a gaming chair must work. I mean, a gaming chair, I suspect, Graham, would be acceptable to some degree if they're being encouraged to use that as a learning mechanism. The concerning thing for me was 43% no idea, and 7% was the physio ball, was it not?
Yes, indeed.
Bear in mind, I looked, you had over 200 people there answered. So if my maths is with me, so that was 14 or 15 people went with the physio ball for home working. Now, I'm sure the physios out there might give some reason for it, but that to me is probably the most concerning thing from there, is that would be deemed or thought of as a good way to work from home on a physio ball.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, a physio ball does encourage you to use your core. It does actually move under the pelvis. It actually enables pelvic alignment quite well. So it's good. I mean, the downside of, and certainly why you would never get a physio ball recommended in an office, is because it's dangerous, as you know, you've only got to have somebody else go along and kick it, and you've landed on your coccyx, which is quite painful. So, you know, the physio ball from a legal perspective has issues in that it doesn't fit the DSE criteria of having a 5-star base, having gas height adjustment, you know, having a backrest, etc., which is deemed to be, you know, and I have to be careful here, but it's deemed to be the right type of chair in order to support for prolonged periods of display screen equipment working. So it doesn't have those functions. But at home, and again, you know, it then depends on who you're working for. I mean, if you're working for yourself, you're responsible to yourself. If you're working for a company, does it then fit in with their DSE policy? Does it, you know, does it meet the criteria of what they think is a suitable spec of seating for you to be working at home? Possibly not. Therefore, you probably need to have a conversation with your employer about that. I don't know. I mean, for me, I think the gaming chair thing's really, really interesting. I'm guessing that for a lot of people, it's because in general, those chairs are very padded. They, you know, they're very sculpted, and are seemingly very comfortable to sit on for a long period of time. I'd be really interested to see if we can at some point get someone from some of the seating manufacturers on this show to discuss this as well further, because actually I think there's a massive educational piece here about the fact that that's actually not what an operator chair is designed to do, and that's actually not what is beneficial to you long term. Because this is an issue about, you know, is comfortable right, and comfortable isn't necessarily always right.
It's maybe right in the moment. Maybe it's comfortable as you're playing Fortnite or whatever you're playing, but actually the minute you come off it and you then get out the chair and you go, yeah, that isn't very comfortable now, is it?
Well, it's possibly comfortable. It's possibly comfortable for longer periods throughout the day, and it's actually possibly more comfortable to sit in. But as a lot of the seating companies and ergonomists will tell you, that actually it's not necessarily all about sitting, and it's more about moving. And therefore, I do wonder whether there's a bit with the gaming chair piece that, this is seen as the correct answer, because actually it's making it more comfortable to sit for longer in the day. Whereas actually some operator chairs are quite firm. The sort of movement and adjustment in them can be irritating to people, and that a lot of people therefore won't necessarily find them as comfortable. But actually it may be, depending upon your circumstances, and maybe depending upon any kind of condition that you have as well, that actually that using that kind of equipment might actually save you in the long term. One of the best letters I ever got from a client of mine that I did an assessment for started off by saying, "Can I just say, that chair that you recommended for me, I hated it the day that I got it, and I still hate it now."
Oh, right. Okay.
And I read that and I thought, oh my, here we go. But actually the letter went on to say, but my physio has said that since I have been using this chair, my mobility and the movement in my joints and my the improvement in my overall mobility has improved exponentially, beyond recognition. And now I'm able to climb the stairs where I couldn't do before, and I can do this which I couldn't do before, etc., etc. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, blah blah blah. And that's always sat with me, really, because when we discussed seating with him, or I discussed seating with him, he wanted me to recommend him something that he thought would be comfortable.
Okay.
And I recommended him something that I felt would encourage him to sit and move in a more dynamic way, to get him to move and get up and move about more often as well.
And the movement is the really important piece. I mean, that actually taking those regular breaks and that regular movement is we talk about equipment all day long and seating and things like that, but the key to it all is movement. And I know you're doing your own piece, Graham, around exercise and things like that, but it's so important that people take regular breaks throughout the day. There's lots and lots of advice out there. There's lots of different sort of suggestions, generally making sure somewhere between every 30 and 60 minutes you're getting up, you're moving around, you're doing something. You've got to get out. I guess it's the same with doing long car journeys as well, isn't it? It's getting people out of those, it's a 3-hour drive, I'm just going to push all the way through. It's making sure that people are breaking even a 3-hour journey potentially into 3 pieces. Is almost an hour and break.
Yeah, again, I think I've mentioned this before. I mean, one of the things that I, used to train other assessors on is how to do vehicle assessments or driver assessments for, corporate clients that were in cars all day long, that were beginning to experience issues. And, one of the things was that the driver would always want a different car, because this car's uncomfortable. But, at the end of the day, one of the commonsensical things that I had to talk to people about is those brakes, because if you're, if you're having problems with sciatica or lower back pain, etc., on almost a constant, and you are doing 4-5 hour drives at a time without a break, guess what? Swapping car isn't going to make that much odds.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first thing that has to happen there, I mean, yes, the car has to fit you. Yes, the car, if you're sat very low down, and that might affect your overall condition, then you may need to go for a seat that's a little bit raised up. But ultimately, if you're not stopping periodically to get out the car and actually move and go for a walk, then you know, you need to do that. And it's one of the things that I said over and over and over to people again, is I said, look, it doesn't matter, you know, and I used to do 80,000 miles a year in a car.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter where I go. I do not do more than 2 hours at a time, ever.
What's the regulations? Sorry, we're going slightly off topic here, Graham, but for something like HGV drivers, what's their sort of rules around breaks? I mean, again, I wonder if that will be something that will be looked at to make sure people are taking more frequent breaks. I wonder what.
Yeah, well, certainly, I don't know what the number of hours is that, you know. Obviously, they've got tachometers and they have to have breaks, but. You know, again, though, I actually always used to think, well, this is a daft thing here.
Yeah.
We've got legislation for an HGV. Of course, an HGV is heavy, and you know, and it's potentially more dangerous than you know, a small car on the road. But in terms of the tiredness piece, a person's a person at the end of the day, and if it's not right for an HGV driver, for example, to drive more than so many hours at a time without a break, then it's not right for anybody else on the road to be doing that, regardless of whether they've got a tacho, etc. I mean, one of the things that I would always say to a company, if they employ people that are on the road for long periods of time, and it's part of their role, is that they should have driver's assessments in there, and they also ought to have a driving policy for any of those members of staff, and you know, it should cover simple things as well, like the fact that the company will not tolerate a driver taking telephone calls, you know, and that's a really important cultural piece, because it also means that the people that are internal within that company need to have a respect for the fact that if you, and you would know this as someone that's been out on the road, you know, that the company do not expect you to be traveling somewhere and be doing work at the same time, because if they do, and then they also have a policy, you know, there that says, you know, you shouldn't be answering the telephone whilst you're, you know, or you shouldn't be texting while you're on the road. Well, then don't make it part of the job that that person has to be answering their emails or you know, trying to set up appointments, or aren't, you know, getting involved in heavy conversations, not just light conversations, but heavy conversations where they have to make important decisions whilst they're mobile on the road. Make sure that person is stopped somewhere to be able to join in that conversation before that happens. That's a minefield. But I've seen it all out there on the road before now. I have seen people using their laptops as they're driving. I've certainly seen hundreds of people texting away while they're driving. And I totally understand it, because if those people, it's part and parcel of their work to achieve so much within the day, but they've also got to, you know, they're also tasked with seeing X, Y, and Z customers during the day. How do they do their job without breaking the law? And it's wrong.
Yeah, I do think, though, I mean, we're going slightly off topic there, but and it almost brings us back to working at the laptop again. But I do think that there will be a real, you know, for the mobile salespeople like myself, and, you know, with colleagues that we speak to on a regular basis and across all industries and sectors, I do think when we are in a position to go out and see people again, then I think this has really opened a lot of organizations' eyes to the fact that how many journeys are being undertaken are probably unnecessary, in that how many of those meetings could have been conducted over the various formats of Teams or Zoom or Skype or whatever it would be. You know, how many meetings, you know, was it a necessary journey? Was it you did that journey because that's what you do? Or actually, did you do that journey because you needed to be there in person and to make a difference? I think that will change for a lot of salespeople and mobile workers going forward. Is that I think the amount of journeys they've been doing will stay, a good portion, I should say, will stay on various types of platform that we're using today.
I'm so glad about that. And, you know, if it means, from an ergonomics point of view, if it means that we see less people stopping by the side of the road, trying to use their laptop on the top of the steering wheel, typing up there because this email or this report has to be in by 2 o'clock. Whilst they're having to go out and see somebody, then that's brilliant because again, for all of those people that have been there, seen it, and done it, it's not good, and it doesn't help anybody. Coffee sales may go down, out on the road, but other than that, it's good for the individuals that are involved because it does put a strain on your body, and I'm sure there's hundreds and thousands of salespeople out there that have ended up with back problems or musculoskeletal issues over the years because we just didn't sit right, or we didn't we drove for too long. So
absolutely,
it's now you mentioned right at the beginning of the program running out of blood. Personally, my blood is all right at the moment. I've got enough blood, but other people are running out of it. Primarily hospitals, I assume. So, there's an issue, is there, at the moment in terms of the amount of blood that's being collected?
I mean, it's something I used to do, over 20 years ago, did on a regular basis, and then for whatever reason got out of the habit. And then I guess a great use of social media was a number of things kept appearing up on things like Facebook, etc., sort of encouraging people to give blood. So I sort of got back into it and went yesterday and donated a pint of blood.
I'm glad you clarified.
Yes, yeah. But it was interesting just chatting to the people there. I mean, I have to say it was a fantastic setup at the one in New Street in Birmingham. Great setup, made you feel very comfortable from a COVID perspective. But they were just saying the demand and the demand for blood is particularly high, but they've been particularly hit by people reluctant to come out the home and make journeys, and obviously it will be classified as an essential journey, but it was just something that I think potentially gets sort of lost along the way when you're always thinking about, well, the shops aren't open and this, that and the other. But it was just an area that I think potentially has sort of been sort of over I guess slightly overlooked really, and impacted quite a lot by the fact that people are not going out the house, and therefore people aren't able to give blood, and therefore it's just the knock-on effects that come from that. So it was I was delighted to get back involved, and obviously would encourage people wherever possible, if you are within the parameters of the people who are able to give blood, and if you've not done it before, certainly think about it. But again, COVID having an impact on that was just you talk to the professionals up close and personal. It was quite staggering really, and there were people just not turning up on the day. You're booking appointments, there was lots of empty beds where normally they would need people. So it was an interesting experience, Graham.
Well,
definitely.
I'm glad you brought it up for the purists out there who are going, well, that's got absolutely nothing to do with ergonomics. No, it hasn't. It hasn't got anything to do with ergonomics at all. But occasionally, I think we've got a platform here. We need to share, just our experience of what's going on out there, and it's a very real point. And it does show you that during this pandemic, there have been certain things where the spotlight has fallen on issues, and then there are other things bubbling away underneath where not necessarily the spotlight hits, but actually really, really crucial things that need addressing, and this is clearly one of them. We know what the big issues are, if you like, with COVID, and we talk about, or society talks about, the hospitality industry being hit, and retailers, and who's going to be left when we finally get back to the high street, etc. But I mean, we do know, how tough it's been all the way through this for the NHS, etc. But this is a major part of that. Is if you run out of blood, then and the important thing here as well, I suppose, is also bringing it back into, yes, we've lost 100,000 people to COVID. No words can ever sort of describe how terrible this pandemic has been. But clearly, at the same time, other people in hospital for routine operations, routine things, etc., are requiring blood. And we don't want them to be statistics as well, because we become very insular and start just worrying about ourselves. So I'll have to look into this now.
I think it's worthwhile, and especially if you're a fan of either Orange Club biscuits or Kit Kats, because there was plenty of supply of those. So again, if you want, for no other reason and you want some free snacks, whilst you're doing the right thing, there is a very nice sugar reward for you as well whilst you're there.
Well, I'm very glad that you mentioned Kit Kats, because actually, I am. I'll just bring this up.
And that wasn't planned, was it, Graham, either?
That wasn't planned. For those of you that are listening on Spotify, I'm launching, and I bring this in as well. We're launching with Rory Berry next week a Break the Day session, which we're going to do every week. And it's just 30 minutes. And we happen to use a particular chocolate bar to advertise that, because it's well known for having a break. But the point of that there was that we found that just so many people are not taking breaks at all. In fact, I even spoke to someone again this morning who said about one of those sessions, I never managed to come to one of your sessions because I can't find the time to make it. And I said, well, when is a good time for you? And they said, well, at 5 o'clock when I finish work.
That's not a break.
And I said, well, that defeats the object of what this is all about. This is about people taking a break in the day. And that's a very scary thing. And we've mentioned it before, but too many people, because of the working from home thing, are not breaking away from their computer one bit. And it's why with our friends at Mousetrapper have been doing this walk every morning or during the day. It's not necessarily a long walk. I think I've clocked up about 40k in January, but that's 40k that some people would not do.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't take long every day, but it's out there, a break. It's a physical break. It's getting some fresh air and it's getting some time to yourself. And honestly, folks, if you can't take even 20 minutes for yourself at some point during the day, you're doing something wrong. And I'm
sure those people, Graham, if they were in the office, would be going and having a sandwich or something like that away from their desk. So if you were able to do it then, you've just got to try and replicate it at home, haven't you?
Yeah, well, if you were in the office and you still weren't doing it, then again, there's something wrong. And it's funny, actually, because the amount of people that I talked to, even when I was, just prior to COVID, going out and visiting people in the office who don't think about a structured break. They don't think about a break during the day. We are becoming a culture of people obsessed with getting the work done in the day. Sometimes it's because in order to do the mandatory hours required, if forsaking the break in the day means you can go home a little bit earlier. I think bosses need to start looking at that. And actually going, well, okay, I understand what you're doing there, but I actually need you to take a break.
Yeah, definitely.
Because people, your mind is just not productive if you just keep going all day. You will zone out for bits of it. And why do people want to employ people whose minds are not going to be active all day long? If you want creative people, if you want people to be on it, you've got to encourage them to take a break, or find ways of incorporating that into a kind of work as well. Take a break together, have a chat about something that's relevant to work but not work. So it's a bit of downtime together, and it's maybe a time just to get to know each other as a team a bit better in the day. And that's what that space is for as well. It's just a making a space for people.
Well, I will join you on that next week, Graham. I look forward to that.
Thank you very much. So that's on Tuesday next week at 1 o'clock. Also, I'm talking to Philippa Butler, who's going to be talking at the Health and Wellbeing event. There's for it. You're seeing that if you're watching this. You're not seeing it if you're on Spotify. That's on tomorrow, Thursday, the 28th, between 3 and 5 p.m. You can get tickets from that by going to the website www.abetterwayoflife.co.uk, which is now at the bottom of the screen for those that can see. We've got nearly 80 people signed up for that already, so
excellent.
It should be a good one, but there's still time to register. It's free, so why wouldn't you come? All these things happening in the space of a week, and we've used up our hour. So
there we go. We're done.
We're done. I will leave my my link to music and ergonomics for another week.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one to be discussed, because I know that you were really pleased that I spoke to Aziz Ibrahim during the week, because you're a massive Ian Brown fan.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe sometime, if we turn the right screws, we get Ian Brown in. That would be interesting. Ian Brown doing ergonomics. What do you think? What do you think he would say?
I have no idea. I dread to think.
Yes, I would.
We'd have to do that after the watershed, potentially, wouldn't we? I'd have said so.
I think we might have to move our time slot for that one.
Yeah.
But,
9 o'clock.
It's like the classic Ian Brown interview with, I can't remember the interviewer's name now, but he was just coming to prominence, and I think he was with Clint Boone from the Inspiral Carpets. The two of them were being interviewed together, and the interviewer wanted him to showcase his martial arts to him. Do you remember this?
No.
Have a look on YouTube. Ian Brown interview, martial arts. And basically they had to cut away from it at the end, because I think Ian Brown showed this interviewer how good he was at martial.
And the interviewer wished they'd never asked that question.
And yeah, because he was actually goading him and saying, "Get up on this table and show me how to do it." Now, I don't think it ended happily. So
no, okay, that's my next job. Ian Brown, martial arts YouTube. Yep, on it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Stephen, for coming in.
Graham, enjoyed it
this week, and we'll see you again next week.
Absolutely.
What time are we on next week? Are we Wednesday? Wednesday at midday next week.
I believe that's what we're doing. Yes,
absolutely. So
back to our usual slot.
Yeah. See you next week on Wednesday. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, good. Don't drive too far, because the police will stop you. I'm telling you, at the moment they're watching everybody.
Absolutely.
So, bye for now, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks, Graham. Bye.